So, why justice feels so soft and different in Korea? And I want to start by saying where this is coming from. This isn't a topic I picked because it sounded interesting, so it's not a theory. For last 3 or 4 years, I spent time watching real trials, the serious ones, and I've been close enough to cases where the harm wasn't abstract. Oh, I'm not a lawyer, so no. This isn't about wanting someone to suffer more. It's not about revenge. What stuck with me was something quieter. Like, the more I watched, the more I felt a gap. So, between how big the harm was and how small the response sometimes felt like. And honestly, that gap felt especially noticeable in Korea. So, that's where the question started for me. Why do people feel so much anger towards serious crimes, but nothing really seems to change? So let's make this concrete. In Korea, even in very serious cases involving sexual violence like against children or murder, sentence often land around 10 years, sometimes a bit more, sometimes less. It usually feels like more less. So when people outside Korea hear this, they usually pause, not in an angry way because we know that we can't change. So it's more like, oh, is it real again? Like, wait, really? So, because in many Western countries, similar crimes lead to something very different, not only 10 years, like life sentence, sometimes multiple ones, like sentence that add up with 100 of years. So, this difference isn't about cruelty, it's about the system thinks its job is. So, in many Western systems, the logic is pretty simple. Like, some harm is so destructive that the priority becomes protection. So remove the offender, makes sure that it can't happen again. So when people say Western punishment looks extreme, I don't hear exception with punishment. I hear a system saying like protecting the individual matters more than preserving the offender's future. So what bothers me about in Korea isn't restraint. It's about how small the response can feel next to the damage what was done. Revenge isn't violence, it's an unanswered pain. I want to slow down here. When somebody's body or dignity or childhood is taken from them, wanting revenge isn't strange, but it's not about enjoying violence, it's about recognition. Because revenge shows up when someone feels this is real and I'm stuck here, but it feels like the world is moving too fast. So I'm not interested in judging that impulse. Its real question is, what is a society supposed to do with it? Because pain that no one carries doesn't disappear at all. That's why law exists. Not because people are naturally gentle, but because uncarried harm eventually turns to more dangerous things. So, law, I think what law is actually there for, like, law isn't meant for comfort feelings. The real job is to step in so individuals don't have to answer violence on their own. So it's the state saying, if you have to carry this by yourself, we'll carry it publicly. So when law works, anger doesn't magically go away, but it finally has someone to land. So a line gets drawn, responsibility gets named, someone stays with the damage. So that's why justice sometimes feels finished. Not because the pain is gone, but because the person isn't alone with it anymore. But where things really start to differ, this is where I kept noticing a deeper difference. Like in many Western legal systems, justice is framed very directly. And one person is harmed, like another person violates, the state steps in and it responds, almost confrontational. But in Korea, justice often works through a different lens. So harm isn't only seen as something between two individuals, it's seen as something that disrupts the whole society or group or the network. So the question quietly shifts, not just what does the person deserve, but like how do we restore balance without tearing the group apart? So this shift changes everything because when harmony becomes the priority, direct confrontation starts to feel risky. So clear blame feels disruptive. Strong punishment feels like it might create more damage. So responsibility spreads out, it gets softer, and eventually no one fully holds it. So this doesn't mean Korean society doesn't care about suffering. It means it's deeply uncomfortable with rupture. So the system tries to absorb shock, not amplify it. But some harm can't be absorbed quietly. Not even an individual case, like in many ways. So some violations don't just disturb balance, they break someone's whole life. And then the response focus on calming down things instead of naming what was broken. So people don't feel answered, they just feel managed by something. So why justice? Why Western justice feels more decisive? Like Western justice often feels convincing not because it's harsh, but because it doesn't avoid the collision. The state doesn't hide behind the neutral language. It doesn't soften what happened. It names the harm exactly and it accepts the cost of responding. And that matters because it tells the victim we're not going to minimize this and it tells society this is the line. If you cross it, the response is clear. That kind of justice isn't about balance, it's about ownership. Let's talk about a real case. In the US, Larry Nassar, like you all guys know, he abused over like 260 ladies and girls. So, yes, the life sentence mattered, but what stayed with people wasn't about the number. It was a process. Like more than 160 victims were allowed to speak out there, one by one, without being rushed. The judge didn't cut them off, the system didn't summarize their pain to evidence. It really stayed with them. So that's why the outcome felt legitimate. Not because it was served, but because the state didn't step back. Oh, I think in Korea that will not happen. Maybe in drama. So let's compare to Korea. Like 2008, like I don't know, like 20 years ago, Cho Do-sun, he is so famous in Korea. Like he raped an 8 years old girl and the damage was permanent. I don't want to describe about the damagement. You search it. So life imprisonment was discussed, but the final sentence was around like 12 years. So for many people, it was just disappointing. It came symbolic, not only because of the number, but because of the reasoning, like mitigating factors, the offender's condition, and the possibility of rehabilitation. So the offender's future was carefully weighed, and the victim's future felt less present. So when the law steps back, violence doesn't immediately fill the space, distrust does. So distrust toward courts, institutions, justice itself, or like whatever. It's not easy to trust. So justice turns into something symbolic, something that people endure, but not something that actually resolves. So what people are really angry about when people in Korea express rage after serious crimes, I don't think they're demanding cruelty. I think they're reacting to abandonment, to the feelings that when responsibility gets uncomfortable, like the system retreats. So the anger isn't about punishment, it's about someone staying. So I think what we're actually jealous of, let me just So let me just say plainly, we're not jealous of the harsher sentences. We are jealous of the system that doesn't leave victims alone with their anger or problems. So we're jealous of the state that doesn't hide behind neutrality when things get messy. That isn't cruelty. I think that is civilization. So what justice really comes down to, justice isn't about severity. It's about presence, about who stays when something breaks, when the law fully carries responsibility. Like, people don't need revenge fantasies, not because they're better people, but because they're not alone anymore. If we want less rage or less distrust, less quiet despair, we don't need to softer justice. I think we need justice that doesn't look away.